What we're going to do is we're going to be simplifying polynomials, and this right here should be a little bit of a review of Algebra 1. We're going to add a little bit more, but it's the same naming as what we did in Algebra 1. Now there's two different ways that we name things. We name it based off of terms. So monomial means one term, binomial means two, trinomial means three, poly means four or more. And so if we're looking at this one right here, even though it's degree 4, it's just one term, so that's why it's monomial. The other way that we classify it is based off of degree. So there's no x's right here, so that would be constant. Here we have 1x, so that's linear. Here we have an x squared, so that's quadratic. Here we have an x cubed, so that's cubic. And here we have an x to the fourth, so that would be quartic. So we're going to be naming each of them. I'm first going to name it based off of the term. So one term is a monomial. And then it's degree 1, so that right there would be a linear. The second one, I have two terms, so I'm going to call that a binomial. And then degree 2 would be a quadratic. This next one, I see three terms. Pluses and minuses separate terms, so I'm going to call that a trinomial. And then my largest degree is a 2, so I call that a quadratic. This time we have four terms, so I'm going to call that a polynomial. Poly meaning many. And then the highest exponent is 3, so that's degree 3, so I'm going to call that a cubic. So that's naming the polynomials. Now we're going to be simplifying. We're going to be adding, subtracting, and multiplying. So when we're adding the like terms. 2x squared, 3x squared gives us 5x squared. I have 3x minus x, which is 2x. Then I have minus 5 plus 1, which is minus 4. And that right there is my adding the two trinomials. For letter B, I see a negative, so I'm going to distribute it. So that gives me negative x minus 9. So when I'm adding the like terms, this is my only cubic term, so I have negative 4x cubed. Then I'm going to look at my quadratic terms. So I have an x squared and I have minus 7x squared. So that's going to be negative 6x squared. Then I'm going to look at my x's. And I have a negative x and a positive 3x, which is going to be positive 2x. And then my last term, I have a negative 9 and a negative 9. So that right there is negative 18. Now for the next one, this right here is multiplication. And we know it's multiplication because there's no sign in between. So we're going to be using FOIL. We're going to multiply the first term by each of the terms. And so that gives us x negative 4x to the fourth. Then I have negative x to the third. Then I have positive x squared. I'm going to take the negative 2 and distribute it to each of the terms. So I have positive 8x cubed. Then I have a positive 2x squared. And then I have a negative 2x. Now I'm going to look at the negative 1. That gives me a positive 4x squared. This gives me a positive x. And this gives me a negative 1. So now I'm going to add the like terms. I have the negative 4x to the fourth. I cross it off sometimes so I don't get lost. Then I look at the cubes, and that's negative 1 and positive 8. So that would be a positive 7x cubed. Then I have an x squared, a 2x squared, and a 4x squared. So that right there would be 7x squared. And then I have a negative 2x and a positive x. So that's negative x. And then minus 1. And that right there is my answer. Now for letter D, whenever it's squared, we're going to write it twice. So that would be x squared minus 3x plus 5. Then we're going to FOIL it. X squared times x squared is x to the fourth. X squared times negative 3x is negative 3x cubed. X squared times 5 gives me 5x squared. Negative 3x times x squared is negative 3x cubed. Negative 3x times negative 3x is positive 9x squared. Negative 3x times 5 gives us 15x. Then I'm going to take the 5 times x squared gives me 5x squared. 5 times negative 3x is negative 15x. And 5 times 5 gives me 25. I'm going to add the like terms. I keep the x to the fourth. That's the only quartic term. Then I have a negative 3x cubed and a negative 3x cubed, so that's negative 6x cubed. I have a 5x squared, a 9x squared, and another 5x squared, which is positive 19x squared. Then I have a negative 15x and a negative 15x, which is negative 30x, and a 25. Okay, letter E, here we're subtracting, so I'm going to distribute the negative to each of the terms. So I have the 5x squared minus 7x plus 6 minus 9x squared plus x minus 10. So once again, I add the like terms, so that would be negative 4x squared. Then I have negative 7x and x, which is negative 6x. And then I have a positive 6 and a negative 10, which is negative 4. My last one, I have 3 binomials. I get to decide what order. I'm going to pick the last 2 to multiply first because there's a difference in the middle. They're conjugates technically. So 2x times 2x gives me 4x squared. 2x times 1 is 2x. Negative 1 times 2x is negative 2x. And negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Notice that the 2 middle terms cancel, so that's why I did this one first. It makes it a little bit easier. And then I have 4x squared minus 1. I'm going to take the x times the 4x squared, which is 4x cubed, x times the negative 1, which is negative x, and then 4 times 4x squared, which is 16x squared, and 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. I like my answers to be in descending order, so I'm going to put 4x cubed plus 16x squared minus x minus 4. This isn't more correct, it just looks more organized.